Feras was jailed by the Syrian regime. He described himself as an independent movie director. His movie actually has won more or less every film festival, and he's been nominated for the Academy Award. So let's hope that you will win the Oscars on March 4th. So good luck, Feras. We also have with us Brian Katulis, who's with the Center for American Progress. He's a familiar face in the DC think tank world. He knows the Middle East very well, and he knows Syria for sure. So we were looking forward to ask him a few questions. And we have Steve Cook, of course, of the Council of Foreign Relations, who just wrote an article in Foreign Policy about the Trump administration and the Middle East. So maybe all of you can check this online, and I urge you to look also at the bios. I'm just trying to be brief here. We have about 25 minutes of discussion. I'll ask a few questions, and then I'll open the floor for everyone to have a chance to ask a question. Please identify yourself and trying to be precise so we can get a dynamic discussion here. So Feras, let me start with you of kind of some news actually. Karim Abed, who's a producer of this movie, was denied a visa to enter the United States and to attend the Oscar ceremony under the Immigration and Nationality Act 212F, which is the provision that President Trump used for the travel ban. Is this a kind of collective punishment against Syrians to start with? I mean, this person was risked his life. He was inside helping you making this movie, and yet he was deprived from the moment of coming to the United States as an artist to come and celebrate this movie. What does it mean for you, and how can you, is this any way you can reverse this policy?
I can make it shortly. It's against the freedom of expressions.
So, is this any way that we can help him to come to the United States? Is this, I know there has been petition, there's many people who try to bring him in, and I mean, he's fallen victim to our policy basically of being deprived or banned from coming just on the mere fact that he's a Syrian, nothing more, nothing less. Does this affect the movie? Does it affect the joy and the pain of both of you working together over almost 3 years or maybe 4 years of producing this movie?
It's helped the Russian actually so much in their policy in Syria and what they do. I mean, that's mean anything's help Russian, that's mean the same things help killing the people in Syria. That's what I can say. I mean, I love to be short about this. It's against the international justice, it's against the rights of anyone who is artist to move, to be part from his celebration for his movie, to share his word, to say his word around the world, and to be listened, because we are, as you know, all of us, we know that, and many of the audience here who is watching this movie, we haven't any voice for a long time because Assad regime and the dictatorship. So yeah, this is a very important moment for us to say stop the war in Syria. We're seeking the peace, we're seeking for justice, nothing more. We are not enemy for anyone. It's not in my attention, the all-Russian policy at all. They're just coming to bomb my country, and this is the truth, and we're showing the truth. No more.
You say always that you love to make movies, that actually you're not political, although the story is very political and it's very moving. But you have become under attack recently by pro-Russia and pro-regime trolls who are trying to discredit you, to call you a spy, to call you a terrorist sympathizer, etc. Is this a systematic campaign against you, against your movie, trying to stop you from winning an Oscar, or even trying to discredit the story of the white helmets and the civilians who risked their life to help others?
Actually, you know that if the film win the Oscar, it's gonna be like have a lot of possibilities to be watched from everywhere. I mean, they will be the first priority for everyone to watch this movie. And if the film they tried from when the film released in Sundance, they try a lot to stop it, to come in and they demonstrate in Sydney against the film, and they distribute the paper that the subject of the film is tourism group, I'm tourism director, whatever. All this is like to destroy the trust between me and the audience, to not the audience trust in my subject. And this is a way that Russian use it from the Soviet times, like about destroy the trust and make the people not believe you and try to accuse you and attack you, and then it changed from vocal to physical attack in a way. Yeah, of course. I mean, I feel scared because of course gonna affect in a way in the election and in the voting of the for the Academy for the films, because as all of the American testimony or they've been witnesses on how the Russians they play in a way in the social media big rules in the American election. We all of us know that. I mean, a lot of us like being very close to see this is very close picture from that. I've experienced that. I mean, personally, how they go to every single comment from every single person about the movie, and they write a comment, bring a picture, and they keep posted. I mean, we're talking about 10, 100,000 of people. They repost the negative things, and any journalist write about the movie, they take this as post and they write different opinion. Sometimes they pick up a story, change the contents, change the headlines, and then you find like 3 stories about the films. So which story are you gonna believe? Of course you're gonna be like prepared to or ignore this film and said, oh, okay, I'm not gonna put myself in this position of this is film.
So definitely we know about the Russian interference, not just in the movie, but in this country with the election. I wanted to, sorry, do you want to say something? All right. So let me come to Brian very quickly. You know, I remember when I covered wars in Africa as a war correspondent, there was a time when people say, people are like have their viewers fatigue. They're just tired and sick of watching starving kids in their screen, especially when they're having their dinner. Is this Syria become the same? Why is Syria is absent from American networks coverage? We rarely see anything. The statistics are staggering. 500,000 dead, 12 million displaced or refugees, the worst humanitarian crisis in the 21st century, and yet we don't see much coverage. Why is that?
Well, first, I want to thank Feras and salute you, you and your colleagues, for everything that you've done here. It's an amazing display of humanity, something that I think is often not part of our policy and political debates. When we talk about Syria, and Nadia, to your question, it often comes up as sort of like the 9th or 10th issue, especially over the last year, with the Trump administration and with our attention deficit disorder, our inability to focus on the basic humanity that I think actually is the driver for broader security. Stephen and I debate quite a lot and talk about policy. And when you think about Syria in this town over the last several years, at first it came up in the context of Daesh or ISIS. And those images were most Syrian in the minds of most people, of beheadings, of atrocities and things like this. More recently, I think under the Trump administration, it has been focused on Iran and some of the geopolitical moves, a bit on Turkey. But for us, what you've done is so powerful, is place the Syrian people right back front and center, and with the images, but also the stories of people who, you look at the rubble, and they're literally sifting through it and trying to save and salvage everything that you can. And in some ways, I see that as a metaphor for the world that we live in right now, for what Syria faces. But to your questions, Nadia, I think the answer is a complicated one. It's one where under the Obama administration, I think the memory of the Iraq War, of everything that our country lost, really led people to be overly cautious. And in some ways that's understandable. But it also led us to stick our head in the sand and not see the stories of what's happening right now. Today, I think it's more of a feature of there's so many other things that aren't really dominating our conscience here. And my hope is, with this film, with this discussion tonight, we can at least do one thing, which is put the question of how do you actually protect Syrians? How do you, ordinary people, men, women, and children, Syrians first, in the policy discussion, rather than Iran, ISIS, and Turkey, and all of these geopolitical factors. Easier said than done, but I thank again Feras and salute you for everything that you've done.
Thank you so much.
I mean, they always say about movies are made for the elite and the TV is for the masses. So how can you get a story like this being told on television screens so people can sympathize with the civilians? And maybe my point now to Stephen is about this policy, the current White House. Is this a Syria policy under President Trump? Do you see it?
Well, first, before I answer the question, I find myself in the unusual position of something quite unusual for me, being speechless as a result of seeing this film. This was really extraordinary. For us to be congratulated for this, it was extraordinarily difficult to watch, and as Brian said, it really put the Syrian people back in the center of the story, something that we clearly have lost over the course of however many years. Now, I think the Trump administration does have a policy regarding Syria, but it's not about Syria and it's not about Syrians. It has become a policy about great power competition and regional competition. It's about checking Iran and countering what we perceive to be Russian encroachment into the region. In fact, it is basically a return to American foreign policy in the Middle East prior to the George W. Bush administration, rather than it is a rather pedestrian foreign policy. It won't work because of the enormous changes that we've seen in the Middle East, and one of those is, of course, the destruction of Syria. So I'm afraid that without the kind of sustained attention, and I will be shocked if this film does not win the Academy Award, without the sustained attention of this film, and hopefully that it'll win. And even then, I'm not even quite confident that this administration will focus on the Syrian people and a Syria policy. Remember, the president campaigned on essentially the idea that the United States is expending too many resources in the Middle East, was willing to accommodate essentially the continuation of the Assad regime so long as the United States was free to bomb the expletive out of ISIS. And I think that that's essentially the policy that is one that's in place right now.
I mean, just quickly before I come back to Feras, to Brian again, the irony of it all is this movie was made when Aleppo was besieged under actually the watch of President Obama. But now we have another scene, horrific scenes of the eastern Ghouta, which is a suburb of Damascus. And we have seen hundreds of the same pictures that you saw tonight. You know, kids being pulled out of the rubbles, you know, fathers and mothers been mourning their kids. Again, it's happening, you know, a few years later, and we're talking about it. I mean, anybody can do anything?
Well, I hope so. And this is back to your earlier question of why the broadcast media is not covering it. And it's a puzzle to me, really. And as we sit here in this theater tonight, literally, women, children are being killed. They're being murdered by the government in Syria. It's a government that actually consciously puts barrel bombs together with shrapnel and other bits that are intended to maim and kill its own citizens. You get front page print coverage of this, New York Times and the Washington Post. But back to sort of the point I was trying to stress, is our attention deficit disorder. And it used to be in news, I mean, the crass sort of statement was, if it bleeds, it leads. And unfortunately, I think the new phrase is, if it tweets, it leads. That anything that comes out of our current sort of troll-in-chief, commander-in-chief, leads to all of the sort of television news to have not only endless commentary on this, but panels that are double the size of our panel tonight, talking about every facet of it. And it's important for our democracy to have that discussion, but it's important also to have this discussion. And to me, sort of the question of what can we do with citizens, with others who have just want to tune this out, with Congress, with activist groups. How do you assemble a coalition that can take a look at this film and say, this is something that that should shock us into action, that should say, this is something that we need to do something about. And I think that's the discussion policy people and political people need to have.
Feras, I think you were extremely successful in telling the story through the characters that you have chose in the movie. But there is also symbolism, I think. I know you've been asked about this before, about the fish tank, for example. I mean, does it something that represent life in the midst of all the destruction, that something will come back? What subtle messages that you're trying to relay in this movie that we saw or maybe we didn't see?
Yeah, I mean, normally I don't like to analyze what the element of the story, because it's more open if you leave it for the audience who are reading this story. But the idea is coming after Khalid. Khalid is a guy, ordinary guy, is coming from a well-educated family. The main characters, his father is a teacher, his mother is a teacher, and he's a father and his mother grew up in Syria in the times of 80th, where Assad father was control and tried to control the money and the economist, and all of them, there was like kind of, to be teacher, you are poor. So this is guy is just quite from the school to help his family because there is not enough money. And and then he's have an uncle. He wanna be like he's have an uncle. He's working in as a civil defense firefighters, and he was dreaming to be a firefighters, and he never imagined that he gonna be like in nightmare, and fighting for his dream, trying to do something with his two daughters, beloved daughter, which is they love him a lot and he loved them a lot, and there's very intimate relation with these things, which is like bring us for the meaning of the life, the big philosophy question about the meaning of the life, why we are here, what we're doing, how we can change. And when Khalid killed, it just remember Khalid when he just took us to discover the city and the resistance of the human in one of the mid of any human situation, where between 15 to 25 bombs from the Russians and the Assad regime over the city, and function group also around, and you know all the decision people who just want to have a life, and took us to see the fish, to just educate us with his symbolism, easy way that the life more powerful from the death. The belief in your home, in your ground, in what you love and what you fight for is more powerful from anything. And then when I saw the people, the placement from Aleppo, I just decided, I asked myself what my mission, what my mission as an artist, but what's the dream of these people. And then I decided like to put this is the fish inside, this is this destruction house, which is like remind us in all the wars. Remind us in the houses in London, in Washington, in Berlin, in Rome, and everything. It's look house completely, but there is a fish still like survive and swimming. It's our memory. It's our fight for the life. It's our soul. Even the displacement, the humans. Yeah, it's something for justice and the life.
All right. I'm gonna open the floor for questions, but very quickly before I do that, I just want to ask Feras to, not related really to the movie, but there's an interesting story that's taken my mind, and you can mention it very briefly. I asked him once why you want to become a movie director, and he told me the story of how he grew up under the Ba'ath Party during the father of Bashar al-Assad, Hafiz al-Assad, and then the security service came to your father's house, who was a teacher, and then what they have to do to...
Then my father heard that they were coming to the home and he have like this is books not allowed. So he collect all the books and our albums and taking like a small hole and putting all the books and album and burning that in front of me and just like 5 meters far from him. And I saw this is reflection of the fire on his face, and I don't know, was like he's crying or something else. And then he took me and put me in the chicken coop and inside, and the police come, as I know, and shouting guns, and my father has changed from that time, and he's living in depression pills from that time. Just when I heard letter from that was told me like, he told not, he didn't tell me because he didn't speak about this accident a lot, and he's slapped in his face because he just want to tell something, and he never try. I mean, he want to write, he do writing, but he didn't publish anything. It's very sad. This is what's happened when you just want to tell the truth. You will be slapped in your face. You will say like you will be accused as a fake newsmaker. Yeah, I will be killed, detonations, whatever.
Elise.
Thank you, and thank you, Feras. I kind of agree with Stephen. I'm not often left speechless, but the film is, I mean, not only your filmmaking and your artistry, but the combination of the heartbreak and the humanity. And I agree with everybody on the panel that more people need to see this film, and if they do, that they can't help but be called to action. And I think the Academy has such an important decision when they're judging this film. And I'm wondering, not only for you, but for Steve and for Brian, if indeed the film does win the Oscar, do you, obviously as a filmmaker, every filmmaker wants their film to win an Academy Award, but would you see it? What would you take away from the award? Would you take away that the Academy is making a statement on more needs to be done in Syria, on the humanity of the white helmets? What do you think the Academy would be saying if they awarded this film? Because not only is it such a human and heartbreaking film, but as we've discussed, your storytelling is so masterful as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm humbled with what you say. Thank you so much. It's big for me. I mean, the Academy and ADA the International Documentary Associations, they release a statement supporting me and supporting my producer, because Trump ban and also supporting us in front of this is the attack from the Russian campaign against our films. And this is one of the big things. They normally don't do this in this time of voting, and this is big for us, actually. What we wish, and actually what our character Mahmoud wished, that because he didn't take the passport from the Syrian regime, they didn't give him the passport because they accuse him as a tourist guy who was working with a tourism group. All our messages for Putin policy and for Putin personally, that he have to stop killing the Syrians, and he have to listen to these voices that screaming in everywhere in Syria that they want some change, want peace, and that our messages. And also for Trump in other way, that the ban is not gonna help to protect US. It's gonna make the things more complicated, because everyone who wanna like me, I love US. I love DC, Nadia knows, and I love New York, and I love Los Angeles. It's something you love, and you can't remove it, because travel thousands of other people who make you hate the places. And if you love something, you're gonna fight for it. And we fight because we love this place also, not because just we love our country and we love that we fight for all the places we love, and we fight for to meet all the people that we love that behind the borders. Yeah.
All right, we'll take 3 questions probably together for the sake of the, gentleman there. Please identify yourself and we'll just wait for the mic.
First of all, thank you very much. Quickly echoing the incredibly powerful film I saw, one of the credits was Orwa and Arabiya, so sharing someone who's been arrested for a film as well. Quickly, I think when you guys were talking about what this will do and when more people see this in the humanity, I think, you know, my wife and I were fortunate enough to spend the last 3 years in the Middle East working for humanitarian groups trying to help as much as we could. But you know, you had someone testify in Congress after the tortures, you know, and nothing happened. You had the UN talking about Eastern Ghouta today, and nothing is going to really happen. But my quick question was, how did you get this footage out? Like, how was this footage gotten to the screen? It's incredibly powerful. That was my question. And on the subject of trying to do something about it, I hope there is something to do. But it's been quite frustrating over the last 6 years. So, but the question's on the footage. Thank you.
Yeah, as the Russian said, FBI and CIA. Yeah, hopefully, I really hopefully, because we lost a lot of footage because there is no internet satellite and not easy way. We was using the internet satellite as any war correspondent that cover all the ways that we put the footage on Dropbox, and somebody like take the footage out and download it, and every day we change the password and all of that. I mean, this is a way that but we lost a lot of footage actually with this way, because you know the internet is not the easy way like during the war times, especially when the siege of Aleppo was very hard. Now the same things. Now I'm shooting film in Ghouta, and the same things. It's very difficult, not easy. Yeah.
Can I just jump in on this footage? It has been frustrating for people who wanted to raise the question. I think this is so powerful. I'm speechless at how powerful it was. The images of these tiny children who murdered. I can only hope that if more people see it, it will provide some sustained attention. Clearly, you've had this experience. I think that's what we have to hope from that this will be some sort of breakthrough type of thing that will focus people's attention on it. It's gut wrenching, quite obviously, and one can only hope.
The movie, by the way, on Netflix, so please share it with, everybody you know. Please, the gentleman there.
First of all, you're a courageous person, and I thank you for your courage and for sharing your story. It is haunting to see the death of Khalid and to think of his children. And I'm curious on 2 things. One, on the storytelling. I think I, like others, will want to know how are his kids. And second, I want to know whether that question will lead to actions, because you've personalized the war and the humanity in such a way that the nexus of their children's story and how they are may haunt others as well.
Children of Khalid, and he have a new child. His wife was pregnant during the shooting the films, and we filmed with her a couple of scenes, but we removed it after Khalid killed, because it was hard like to include her footage in the film, and she was scary, and it was very difficult time for us. I mean, for me especially, like to talk to her and to convince her, and I feel speechless actually, like to talk to somebody to convince him, like I want to put your, because it's hard things in this moment, because Khalid is meaning for many people, not just for me as a filmmaker who was connected for him for a long time, but for the society around, for his friend, that he give them a lot of hope. He's jokey guy, he's don't care about the war, he want to live in his country, and he was have a fun in ugly words. And now the 3 child of Khalid, the 2 daughters and the boy, which is called Khalid now from the mothers, and they hopefully in safe place in Syria. Hopefully they will be survived. That's make me feel the guilty survivor, like many Syrians, and which is before I didn't understand this is the guilty, when I was meeting a lot of people feeling this is feeling. But I mean, hopefully they survive. And that's a big message for the lost children's, the lost generations, and also like for the hopefully not being coming wars over, and hopefully for in Al-Ghouta we can do something and stop that. I don't know, I mean, anyone have any idea to add? It's gonna be great. I'm trying to tell this story, and I want to be shared.
Washington doesn't have a relationship with Damascus, but it has a relationship with Ankara. And Ankara has been bombing Afrin for the last 33 days without any condemnation from Washington. How can we expect something to be done in Damascus, in Syria?
Brian, maybe, or Stephen, would you take this question?
I think you raise a very good question. If the United States doesn't genuinely have a position on its NATO ally bombing Afrin, what can we really expect from the Trump administration when it comes to what the Syrian government and their Russian and Iranian allies are doing? There's really no good answer other than the fact that, as I intimated before, the Trump administration, perhaps by default, perhaps by design, is pursuing a more pedestrian and traditional American approach to the Middle East, which is focused on containing the Iranians, countering the Russians where necessary, supporting its traditional allies in the region, whether it's in the Gulf or whether it's Israel or whether it's Egypt. That has led us to a situation, a continuation of a situation where we've essentially abandoned the people of Syria. There's really no other explanation for that. This is, again, a repeat of a situation that we have seen over and over and over again, where larger geostrategic interests take precedence over people, and the people stuck in the middle suffer greatly.
If I could add, though, to this question before that you asked, and I have to say I share your cynicism about having any impact, especially at this moment and especially with this administration. I've been at the center now for over a decade, and I felt like I used to know how to influence an administration in some sort of way, even by millimeters. And I'm not even certain how all of this sort of is connected inside of the Trump administration at this point. But so I'm not optimistic, but I still, this make me sound like a crazy person. I still have hope that we could actually do something. I have hope because I look out and I see my friend Bassam and a few other people who are fighting this cause every day, and we're talking and what can be done. I know, we put together a letter on the issue of Syrians who were about to be thrown out of this country. They fled the conflict, and I think it had some modest impact in raising consciousness. So I refuse to say that there's, I share your cynicism, but I also say there are things that we can do. At this moment, again, with people being bombed, we can raise our voices, and I think a big part of it is what Feras has done in his movie, is to put the Syrian people right back front and center. There was a hearing in January on Syria policy on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And a lot of the thing that struck me the most is that the Syrian people didn't show up. Like the biggest exchange, and it was with David Satterfield, it was about Iran. It wasn't about the Syrian people. And those are important questions strategically. But I do believe, despite sort of our attention and things like this, because we had a moment a dozen years ago where another issue, Iraq, became a big political issue. It galvanized folks. I don't think that's going to happen in this midterm election. But what I'm saying is that I think at this moment, there's an opportunity for people who are in this room, you're here because you're probably concerned about it, to actually go back to the drawing board. What can be done, even in a modest way, could help save the lives of people who are under siege right now.
Maybe, I don't know if you noticed, but the irony of it is when Khalid was looking for a safe refuge during the movie, he said, let's go to the Kurdish area. And that was when the movie was made 2 years ago. Now there is no safe areas in Syria. Please, the lady in the back.
We'll need this to be our last question.
Thank you very much. Naomi Kohler, I'm with the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. And for us, this was really a remarkable film. I think one of the things that's incredibly humbling for many of us in this room who've been working on Syria is that there are a number of really remarkable films about Syria, and I just want to commend you for making what is the latest of a number that have been incredibly compelling. And I feel like what's so tragic is that we used to think that as long as people knew what was happening, the world would then care and do something. And I think Syria has really shattered, for many of us, any illusion about that. And so I think the really difficult question in the room that's been touched on is what can actually be done now to save lives for the 400,000 people trapped in eastern Ghouta and the over 2 million people in Idlib right now. So I was curious if the panelists could share their thoughts if they were to advise the Trump administration hypothetically right now on how to actually save lives and not just mitigate the harm. What would you recommend?
Okay, maybe since the last question, maybe each of you will give you like a minute to answer.
Well, it's big question for me, and I don't know. I'm bringing this story to ask this question, and to put these two gentlemen to answer on this question.
Anybody want to advise the Trump administration?
Yeah, we do all the time, and I'm not sure they're listening if it's connected to anything. Look, the one thing that I think the Trump administration, and I say this as somebody from the Center for American Progress, has done, at least in its first few months, was tried to establish better goodwill with some of our traditional partners in the Middle East. And Stephen wrote about this in his piece today, with Israel, with Saudi Arabia, with others. They've done that, I think, without any clear point or purpose in mind. They've done it in large part to say that we're sort of correcting for a mistake that the previous administration made, which is part of what they like to do. In all of these instances, and I think Turkey is more of an area of Stephen's expertise, we have a lot more leverage with our partners. Stephen and I will disagree on this, I'm sure, than we actually exercise or use. I think Trump has done that, and I think there are things that can be done. I think our leverage with the Syrian regime and Assad is quite limited at this point. But I think with a lot of the countries that surround Syria at this point, the places where we have a foothold, perhaps with partners in southern Syria, in northeastern Syria, there are places that people have talked about in terms of policy prescriptions of where people can go and feel safe. Easier said than done. We policy people can turn it over forever and ever, but I think at a certain point, the central thing that I would say is that we should use our leverage with some of our closest partners. When you look at some of those close partners, like Israel, they feel threatened as well, and they're taking steps that I think may actually ultimately contribute to an escalation in certain parts of the country, which again takes us far away from what I think is the central point of what Feras's film does, is remember the Syrian people. Remember that they're just not a number, that they actually should be a key factor in our strategic calculus. But the central point, I hope I'm clear, is that we should use the leverage that we have, the goodwill that Trump has tried to build up with some of our partners that have a lot of resources, have a lot of contacts to do better than we have in Syria.
Just quickly, I think the policy community is bereft of ideas as to how to help people in Syria. I think that's the honest answer. And even if we did have leverage with those traditional allies, and I'm not sure how our leverage with Turkey or Israel or the Gulf states would translate into saving people in Eastern Ghouta. I think the real issue is whether the Trump administration wants to directly confront the crimes of the Russian and Iranian governments, along with their partner, the Syrian government, whether they want to confront those directly and what they want to do about them. That, to me, seems to be the one thing that could potentially establish an opportunity for the United Nations and other organizations to provide aid. But what, honestly, is the Trump administration willing to do in order to affect that kind of leverage. If you look at what the Secretary of State has said about Syria, what the administration has done about Syria, its entire policy is to avoid those kinds of tough decisions and let essentially the Syrian conflict burn itself out while protecting our regional interests. So I'm all for leveraging our partners. I don't know to what end our partners will be. It's really our adversaries are the ones that need to be leveraged. And I don't sense the political will from this administration or the Congress in that regard, unfortunately.
I think the criticism should also extend to the Obama administration. I remember asking President Obama, can you assure us that the bloodshed will end in Syria before you leave office? And he said no. You know, I mean, its successive administration has failed the Syrian people. But we have seen the power of filmmaking tonight, and as everybody said on this panel, that actually we are moved by it. And we feel the pain, we feel the frustration, we feel the sadness. But I hope that all of us will find a way to help the Syrian people, the civilians who are trapped in this horrible war, and we'll go to do something, even if it's very small. Even if we think it is tiny, but I think it can go a long way. So thank you again for coming tonight. Thank you, Feras, for making a great movie. And thank you, Steve and Brian, for coming tonight. All right, have a good night, everyone.